We're at a critical inflection point, not only here in Pittsburgh, but for our country, our democracy, and for our planet.
Tonight, a new district and 5 voices who want to represent its people in Washington.
There's a lot of equity in it, and that's what's important to me.
We're just like every other family, my wife and I. We have an account for diapers.
I'm the 20th out of 21 children, 11 girls, 10 boys. My father was a Baptist preacher.
Tonight, they're here in our studios.
It's really just being able to have a message that reaches and the ability to kind of contact people all over this region.
And this hour, a chance for you to see where they stand.
I'm concerned about what pocketbook issues, things that affect the quality of life for our middle class.
When it comes to identifying challenges,
it's infrastructure, right? As we saw a bridge collapse, right? In the city of Bridges.
You know, inflation, right? I mean, a lot of people right now, gas prices going up.
And finding ways forward.
You know, we never had women, we've never had Black women. And we need that diversity of perspective and experience. And right now, at the federal level, we can do more.
Enshrine the right to abortion under federal law. I have plans and ideas for how to actually safeguard this by going into Congress.
I want to be that person who goes, that is able to reach across the aisle, and I think I can bring people together. We're better together.
This is Commitment 2022, the Democratic primary debate in Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the debate focusing on the Democratic primary for the newly redrawn 12th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. My name is Shannon Perrine. If you're watching us tonight, I believe it means you care about your government. WTAE Channel 4 and our partners at the League of Women Voters of Greater Pittsburgh believe in an informed electorate. That's you, the voters. We are honored to present this political debate to help you get to know the Democrats looking to fill an important seat in the United States House of Representatives representing you. Let's introduce you to the 5 candidates. First, Will Parker says in his bio that he is a Pittsburgh native and a graduate of Pittsburgh Public Schools. He says he is the CEO of a company he founded called VenSpin, which is a mobile delivery app. Jeffrey Woodard is from Erie, PA, and has also lived in Westmoreland County and the city of Pittsburgh. He is the executive director of a nonprofit called the Pennsylvania College Access Program. Woodard has worked as a Pennsylvania State Constable and as an adjunct college professor. Jerry Dickinson was born in McKeesport and was raised by foster parents in Shaler, where he graduated from high school. Dickinson was a Fulbright scholar working in South Africa. He is a law professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Steve Irwin has worked as an attorney, as a political aide for U.S. Senator Arlen Specter and for Pittsburgh Mayor Tom Murphy on the Southwest Pennsylvania Commission. He was appointed head of the Pennsylvania Securities Commission under Governor Ed Rendell. And State Representative Summer Lee graduated from Woodland Hills High School, and after graduating from law school, she worked as a community organizer in Western PA. In 2018, she won a seat in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives representing the 34th District. So here is how tonight's debate will work. We have picked the candidates' names out of a hat to determine in what order they will answer the first question. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the question selected by WTAE, the League of Women Voters, and you, our viewers. Each candidate will have 60 seconds, 1 minute, for a closing statement as well. So let's get into it. The first question tonight has to do with inflation. Americans are paying record high gasoline prices. The stock market is seeing major swings day to day, threatening workers' retirement funds. So if inflation is the problem, what is the solution in Congress specifically? Mr. Will Parker, you're up first to answer that question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Will Parker. I believe that the solution would be to come up with a plan to offset the cost of groceries, gas, that the federal government can put forward, so when we are faced with these type of crises, such as war, the burden doesn't fall on the public. I think the federal government should take up most of the costs and not put it on the people of the public.
Okay. Now we're going to go to the next candidate to answer that very same question. Mr. Jeff Woodard, it's your turn to answer the inflation question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Woodard. And on this topic, I believe that we should work on capping the prices prescription drugs. Work on Congress should pass energy and tax credits. I believe that farmers should produce more, lower the cost of childcare, and also gas prices. I believe that we should take time out and release the energy and the oil that is already preserved that we have here in the United States.
All right, next candidate, Mr. Jerry Dickinson.
Yes, right now the pandemic and the war in Ukraine is driving up inflation, and this is problematic. This is an issue that affects me, my wife, my 2 daughters. We are trying to figure out how much we're going to pay towards diapers for our youngest daughter and how much we're going to pay towards gas prices. And this is an issue that families all across this region are dealing with right now, and it's a problem. And so for me, when I'm in Congress, there are a number of things that can be done. We need to have a clean energy tax credit so they can drive down costs with energy. The other one that we need to do is a vehicular tax credit, so those who are driving get something back at the end of the year because they've been putting so much into gas prices. And then finally, we also need more in child tax credits as well. People are putting way too much money into daycare and childcare and other things like this, and that's a problem. And then finally, food and groceries. This is a problem. Prices are going up, and we need to have a way that the Congress can play a role in actually driving down those prices and subsidies, and I'm looking forward to doing that when I'm in Congress.
Mr. Steve Irwin.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and WTAE for hosting this very, very important discussion today. Inflation is, as Jerry pointed out, really ringing real trouble for people of this region. They are paying too much. Gas is too expensive, medicine's too expensive, groceries are too expensive, and their dollar's not buying what it used to. And so what we've got to do, I support the president and what the president did today by this week by increasing the gas supply, because that affects what we pay to heat our homes and also for transportation. We also need to start making things in this country so we improve the supply chain and we have more supply, and that'll bring prices down. And we've got to raise the minimum wage to at least $15, a livable wage of $15 or more, so that people have the resources to be able to buy the things they need on a day-to-day basis.
And Representative Summerlee.
Thank you, Sharon. Inflation is a topic that we hear a lot about, and I think that oftentimes we're focusing on the wrong causes of it. Right now, what we know is that corporations will continue to press every single dollar out of American workers and American families. We see it right now as our families struggle to pay for gas and struggle to pay for groceries, but we see corporate profits at some of the highest rates that they've been. We see corporations exploiting our war in Ukraine and exploiting the pandemic. We have to be clear. Corporations need to pay their fair share in taxes. We also have to ensure that corporations and conglomerates are no longer able to bust our unions and to underpay and exploit our workers. I agree. We need to ensure that we have a living wage. Here in our country, we haven't in Pennsylvania had a raise increase since 2009. And right now it's well past time as we see American workers struggling in our community.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Mr. Dickinson, I actually want you to give us a little bit of rebuttal on this specific issue because I think it's really important. You talked about tax credits. How do you pay for that?
Sure. Well, obviously, we can raise taxes on major corporations and the wealthy. That's very important. Right now, we have a huge inequality gap in our country. We're one of the most unequal societies in all the world. And as a result of that, we need to make sure that corporations are paying their fair share and that the wealthiest Americans throughout this country are paying their fair share as well. And that's one way to do it. The other way, of course, is to drive and shift money from our defense budget. The DOD has billions of dollars that obviously can be shifted away from our military to then be used for purposes of tax credits and actually driving down the cost of living for our families. And this would help not only me and my wife and my 2 daughters, but thousands of residents across the region.
Thank you. As a member of Congress, you would have influence over international relations and defense spending. The biggest global topic right now is also the topic of one of our viewer questions. Deborah Kennedy asks, what is your position on the war between Russia and Ukraine? So what's your plan to ensure global security and economic recovery? And the first candidate to answer this question on Ukraine is Mr. Jeff Woodard.
I believe, first of all, that we should not be policing the entire United States. I believe that we should take care of our own here at home. At the same time, for Ukraine, I believe we should help support them at what we're doing at the present time with the money that is flowing to the country from throughout the entire world. At the same time, I believe that it's part of the money that is needed for their country right now at the present time. But again, I don't think we should police the entire United States, the entire country, the world.
Mr. Dickinson.
This is a tragedy, what's happening across the world. Russia has invaded a democratic nation state. And my wife and I were sitting watching television a number of weeks ago, watching as women and children and families in Ukraine and Kiev were sheltered in a subway. And we realized that that could be us, that could be our 2 daughters, and that could be the United States. It can happen anywhere. So right now, the United States needs to continue with economic sanctions against Russia to cripple the economy. Number 2, humanitarian crisis. We need to be able to provide a space for refugees from Ukraine to come to the United States. And then we also need to continue with diplomacy and then expand NATO as well to have the Eastern blockade, because Russia will continue to try and invade other nations, and we need to be strong. And I'm proud that President Biden has been strong on this issue in bringing together members of NATO. And I look forward to being in Congress and shepherding this issue as well when I'm there. Thank you.
Mr. Irwin.
What's happening in Ukraine is horrific, and Russia and Putin's infringement on Ukraine is just something that has to be stopped. On a sovereign nation, it's just unacceptable, of course. And I support President Biden's incredible leadership in bringing NATO together and supporting NATO and supporting and giving the arms to those courageous people in Ukraine who have been protecting themselves. We need to continue to build relationships with our other allies who, and by providing humanitarian aid and forging strong relationships with those countries. So they'll be in our backyard and be helping us as we go forward.
And representatively.
Yeah. The war in Ukraine is reprehensible, what Vladimir Putin is doing. I think that our foreign policy has to be guided and rooted in humanitarian practices and human rights, but also in prioritizing diplomatic strategies. I think that President Biden has taken a measured approach right now to the war in Ukraine. What we should be doing right now is ensuring that we are eliminating red tape and that we are investing in every process so that we can welcome Ukrainians who are now not safe in their own homes, making sure that we're welcoming them here to the United States. That means that we must invest in our Refugee Resettlement program, which has been gutted throughout the Trump years and still hasn't been restored to the levels that we need. Pittsburgh has been a home that we have made for Ukrainians in decades past, and we should be welcoming them and avoiding military intervention at all costs. Such an escalation has global implications. And right now it's important that we are keeping every diplomatic pathway open and that we are implementing targeted sanctions on Russian oligarchs so that we can get to Putin's wealth and his source of power.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Mr. Parker.
First, I want to say my condolences to the families of those who lost lives over there in Ukraine. It's a total shame what's going on. My position on it is that this war needs to end. We need to put pressure for more negotiations. We need to have the UN, and keep increasing the sanctions. And we just need to make sure that we move forward with peace on our agenda. It's the public and the people at the bottom who suffer, just like here at home. We have our own wars that we're dealing with. Gun violence, the war on drugs. It's the people at the bottom who suffer, and we need to come up with a strategy and a solution to prevent these things from happening and escalating and encouraging peace.
What I want to do right now is give Representative Lee a little bit more time to talk about refugee resettlement. It isn't just the war in Ukraine that's creating a sort of a pipeline of refugees right now. We've got lots of families from Afghanistan who are looking for places to resettle. How does Congress, first of all, pay for that and help to pay for that? And how do you convince your constituents that that's the right thing to do?
Yeah, we have to lead with our shared humanity and at the forefront, and not xenophobia right now. And it's not just Afghanistan and Ukraine. We also have a humanitarian crisis at the southern border. Creating a pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented folks is also a part of that. When we think about how we're paying for things, we've heard it, and you will hear the refrain throughout this debate probably. Our defense budget, every year we can say that it is the largest that it has ever been, every single year. If we are investing instead in military, not in military interventions, but in that humanitarian aid, that's how we can pay for these things.
Thank you. All right. Our next topic, abortion. A Supreme Court draft opinion indicating the court will overturn Roe versus Wade was leaked. While much of the power to pass laws to ensure the right to have an abortion sits with state legislatures and right now the U.S. Senate in this moment in history, Would you work as a member of Congress to make abortion legal on the federal level? If so, how would you do that? The first candidate to answer the abortion question is Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, Shannon. What just happened a few days ago with regards to the Supreme Court is devastating. The fact that the Supreme Court is planning to overturn Roe v. Wade is going to be detrimental. I'm a pro-choice Democrat, and it's important that we continue to keep that right on the books. I'm a constitutional law professor. I teach about reproductive rights. I know this stuff in and out, and as a result, I'm ready to go down to Congress and make some change. First, Congress needs to pass a piece of legislation to codify the right to abortion under federal law. That would ensure that the right is protected. Number two, I would work alongside the Biden administration to negotiate the leasing of federal land so that abortion providers can provide those resources on federal land and they would not be subject to abortion restrictions in the states. Number three, we need to repeal the Hyde Amendment because we need federal dollars to go to the local and state governments to provide abortion resources. And then number four, we need to ensure that Medicaid provides abortion resources as well, as right now it does not in Pennsylvania. And I look forward to getting down to Congress and getting these things done and delivering to the American people.
Mr. Irwin.
I'm the father of 2 daughters. I can't imagine that they're going to be growing up in a world where they don't have control over the most fundamental and personal choice of control over their bodies and their futures. When I get to Congress, I will absolutely support vigorously a law to codify Roe versus Wade and make it the law of the land, which it's been for the last 50 years. One of the things we have to do is recognize that this is the first step in invasions of privacy, into contraception, in vitro fertilization, gay marriage. And we have to, it's clear now that if the House passes it and the Senate doesn't, it's time to remove the filibuster so that we can actually secure a woman's right to choose.
Representative Lee.
As the only woman on the stage, it's me whose fundamental rights are under attack. It's always women and black and brown folks who are under attack. Right now, we have to be very clear. We need to acknowledge that women can speak for ourselves. Your daughters, your sisters, your wives can speak for themselves, and this election is about that. We need people who are going to go to Congress and are going to fight like it's their rights under attack. Yes, we must codify Roe, but to do that, we need to eliminate the filibuster. With a trifecta in government, the House, the Senate, and the presidency, we need to fight with every tool in the toolbox. We should expand the Supreme Court, and we should talk seriously about an unelected body that's able to sit for lifetime. But right now we have to recognize in Pennsylvania the only thing protecting abortion care is a governor's veto, which means that we need people on ballots who have lived experiences, who will fight every day with everything, not just when we get a leak, but in between for women and our rights. And that's what I will do, and that's what I've been doing as a Pennsylvania state legislator in the Health Committee.
Thank you, Representative Lee. Mr. Parker.
As Summer Lee said, she's the only woman up here. So before I speak about abortion, I want to ask for permission from women to speak about abortion. Thank you. First, I want to say, I am in favor of abortion rights, and I will also on the federal level push to make sure that we can do some things on the federal level to keep abortion legal. But I also would like to make sure that in that legislation that we have caps. There has to be a cap, I believe, to how many abortions one can have, because it's my belief that if it's outside the setting of rape or incest or anything like that, I don't want to see a lot of abortions being had, randomly, 5, 10 abortions by one person. I think that that's not what we should be encouraging, and I think that opens up the door for the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. So I think we have to approach this on a responsible level.
And Mr. Woodard.
I come from a family of 21 children, 11 girls, 10 boys. My father was a Baptist preacher and my mother a homemaker. I have 11 sisters, and with the 11 sisters, I'm not going to be the one to tell them how they can rule and operate their body. Therefore, I'm on the side of abortion rights. The next thing is, if once we go after the abortion rights, what's next? We're going to go after marriage rights and voting rights. So therefore, we are not going to let the Supreme Court or let the other part of the Senate or House state that we should not have our rights to go ahead and allow people to have abortion.
Thank you. Gun violence has exploded across the U.S. Pittsburgh is no exception. The Airbnb party shooting Easter morning shocked the community. The Pittsburgh police chief said much of the violent crime is committed with stolen guns. What can Congress do to reverse that trend? And Mr. Steve Irwin is the first to answer that question.
Thank you, Shannon. So even yesterday, we had 3 people shot in Allentown, 3 young teenagers, 1 who died. And this is just an extension of what happened at Tree of Life, and there's not a day that goes by that we don't have a gun incident. Gun violence is one of the great problems that we have in our region, and it's caused by so many different things: mental health issues, the fact that we have too many guns, we have too many loopholes. There's much that has to be done locally in order to address that, but the federal government has a main role in doing that. We need to have background checks, not only for buying guns, but for bullets. We have to have make sure that the manufacturers of guns are held liable when they're negligent. We have to make sure that there's a law that is not required now under federal government and state government to report stolen and lost guns. And there's just so much we need to do. First of all, we have to give people hope so that they have the opportunity to have rewarding lives in the future, so that they don't have to resort to things like drugs and other things that lead to gun violence.
Representative Lee.
Gun violence is something that touches each and every one of us. In fact, I know the family of one of those young people that we lost, and many more families like that. When we talk about gun violence in this country, oftentimes we think about sensible gun safety laws that we can implement, whether it's lost and stolen laws or background checks, and those are important, and we must fight for those, which means that we must fight for campaign finance reform so we can go up against the gun lobby, but also we have to talk about investments. Gun violence and poverty go hand in hand, not race. What we know is that when we are investing in communities, when we are investing in equitable education and opportunities for our communities, when folks have a living wage and they have housing that is safe and compassionate, when we are creating opportunities for all communities and eradicating poverty, that's how we will solve gun violence. We need our Congress to invest in our communities, invest federal dollars into our communities so that we can solve these problems. Also, we can invest directly into the folks who are doing the work. Our gun violence interrupters and interveners, we should invest directly into those, into our students and our families, so that we can solve this.
That is time. Thank you, Representative Lee. Mr. Parker.
This is why I'm here, because of gun violence. And I don't believe that any candidate up here is really sincere about approaching it the way it needs to be approached. But I am. And how do we do that? We need to address it on an economic level. There's federal funding out here, and we need to make sure that this federal funding goes to our communities so we can increase our businesses, and businesses by people of color. That's the only way we can attack it. We have to attack the poverty issue first. And we just don't attack it from just working at jobs. We have to create our businesses for people of color right here, and you will see a stoppage of all this violence that's happening in our communities.
Mr. Woodard.
I don't believe that it's all based on race when it comes down to gun violence. I believe gun violence is a mental health issue. And having been a mental health issue, I believe that we should, first of all, put money towards helping the people who have the guns, who go out there. Anyone can go out there and find a gun and go out there and commit a homicide. It's more about policing, giving more money and funding to our police officers so they can go out there and do their job and help them and support them to take care of the violence that's going on. We have a lot of stolen guns that's out there that the officers are coming up with and are finding. But again, that's more funding that's needed on their behalf so that they can do their job, etc. As far as anyone going out there and committing the homicides or the shootings, it's something that we have to do as a community, as mental health.
All right. And Mr. Dickinson.
Gun violence is an epidemic here in the United States, and many families are affected by this, including mine. We lost a nephew a number of years ago to gun violence here in Pittsburgh, and as a result of that, it's personal, but it's also an issue of policy, and there's a lot that needs to be done. Congress needs to implement the assault weapons ban that was in place back in the 1990s. We can't have people with assault weapons walking around town, and these assault weapons are what are involved in massacres. The other thing we need is universal background checks. We need to make sure that those who are getting access to guns should have them. Number three, there's a number of issues with regards to loopholes for people who come across state lines and get access to a gun when they're not supposed to, and then they go back to their state. That's a major issue as well. And then I'd like to bring a federal grant here to Pittsburgh through Congress that would address hate crimes involving gun violence. And we see that here. We saw it with the Tree of Life. We saw it over the weekend a number of weeks ago. This is a major issue, and when I'm in Congress, I look forward to being able to shepherd this type of policy reform and get things done and deliver for the American people.
Mr. Woodard, I'd like to get more information from you about what you have to say about mental health and providing mental health care for the people who need it most, and how that intersects with gun violence in Pittsburgh.
First of all, I am a supporter of the Second Amendment. So therefore, I believe that individuals who legally and legitimately should own a gun should be allowed to have their gun to go anywhere they want to go and do whatever they want to do with their guns, as long as they are allowed to have them. I don't think that we should have a ban on certain types of guns or anything. If they have their right to carry them, I believe that they should. The mental health part, I believe, is something that we should work on towards people who have a mental illness and should not own those weapons. And again, if we put funding from the federal government to the local areas, and that's where it's going to start, that's where the money needs to go to for mental health counseling. And again, we got rid of the juvenile lockup homes, so I say the juvenile halls,
and that's
the problem.
And that's your time on that. Thank you very much. Along the same topic, did any meaningful police reform take place on the federal level after the murder of George Floyd? What does the police department of the future look like? This question first goes to Representative Lee.
I don't believe that it has. I've been a leader on addressing police violence and police accountability at the state level, where we have been pushing in concert with movement spaces for laws that would protect everyone, right? That would ensure that police officers are not able to go rogue or shoot a child in the back, or making sure that we have special prosecutors so that their friends are not the ones who are prosecuting them. We have to move with urgency, recognizing that we do have a problem, that it is okay to address racial biases and implicit biases in our policing. At the federal level, we have legislation that is stalled. The same at the state level here in Pennsylvania. But the policing in the future would be addressing the root causes of crime, which again are poverty and opportunity. Public safety starts with education equity and housing. It starts with investments in communities and people. That's what we have to think about when we're thinking about what does policing look like in the future? What does a community looks like that is beyond the need of being over-policed, because we have solved equity issues and justice issues, that we've provided them and met their needs through our federal government and our state governments. That's what I envision.
Thank you. Mr. Parker.
Yes, I do believe that some change has been brought about since the George Floyd issue. Listen, we're not always going to win on a legislative level, but we won on out here in the public level, and that's why you have 4 black candidates right here standing at this podium, because this has started a movement, and more are to come. We need to make sure, though, that police officers are getting the proper training, and, they have that connection with the community. They're getting out here, they're talking to the community, they're talking to the people in it. And we just need to bring people together. I think there's too much division in between the police and the public, but who really needs to be addressed, like I said, I don't per se like to address police officers. I like to address corporate officers, because this is a poverty issue and this is getting out of hand. There's a lack of value and we need to address it economically.
Mr. Woodard.
I believe there is a change that came about, but also at the same time, I believe that we also need to continue the funding of our police officers. Our officers need funding so that they can go out there and be trained and go out there and do their job. Often when I hear a lot about defunding police officers, that gets on my nerve about that one, because when we defund the police officers, who's going to be out there protecting us? Who's going to protect our stores? Who's going to protect our kids? The one candidate said that I want to take the police officers out of the schools. If we take the police officers out of the schools, there is a problem there. We have right now in the Pittsburgh public schools itself, a lot of students being assaulted by other students, our teachers being assaulted by some of the students, and we also had recently even lots of school shootings. So therefore, we really need to fund our police officers, and that's the change that I want to see.
Mr. Dickinson.
I'm a consensus builder and bringing people together, and I'm someone who has been affected by police violence. I was assaulted by a police officer over 10 years ago, and obviously that's something that that you carry with for quite some time. But there's a lot that we can do to change this trajectory with policing. Number one, with demilitarizing the police. Our police forces shouldn't look like they're going to war. They should look like they are community partners. And the federal government and Congress can play a role in stopping the surplus of military aid to our local police departments. Number two, I, as a civil rights lawyer, have worked with activist groups here in Pittsburgh on creating a democratically elected police review board to ensure we have accountability over our police departments. And when I'm in Congress, I plan to hopefully ban qualified immunity so that law enforcement officers cannot escape liability when they engage in bad acts, and also pass the George Floyd Act so that we can move forward with consensus on police reform, continue to fund the police departments, but also shift monies towards social services as well. Mr.
Irwin.
Clearly, there's a disparity in sentencing still exists in our society. And I worked in the Attorney General's office and worked on ending disparity in sentencing, which led from indeterminate sentencing to sentencing guidelines and reducing it, but it still exists. We have to get rid of mandatory minimums. We have to make sure we move away from mass incarceration and get people out for crimes that are nonviolent. We do have to pay our police more. You can't pay police $15 or $20 an hour and have them take on this incredibly difficult and courageous job without paying them. We'll get and keep our best police. We have to train our police. We have to give them the support that they need to deal with all the kinds of incredible challenges they face every single day. But ultimately, we have to get rid of the root causes of crime. Educating our children, making sure that they have programs after school, in the summers, they have job training so they can build a life where they don't have to resort to crime in the first place.
Mr. Irwin, I'd like to hear a little bit more from you about the second part of my question, which was, what does the police department of the future look like? I think about the training that the Pennsylvania State Police get compared to maybe a small borough in Western Pennsylvania with a couple of part-time police officers. When you think about the future of the best kind of police department in Western Pennsylvania and really across the nation, if you're working in Congress, what does it look like? How is it better?
Yeah, the best police department is one that's rooted in our community, one where the police live in our community and they know the people and they walk up and down the streets, they know the kids, they know the families, they know how things are supposed to be, and they're able to respond because they have that kind of knowledge, and the people who are being policed have trust in the police people to work together. They also need to have that additional support. We need to be able to have in schools mental health supports and guidance counselors for kids. You can't have one guidance counselor for 700 kids and expect them at a time when they've been growing up in a pandemic where they've been isolated to be able to develop appropriately.
Thank you. This is going to get a lot of attention. This is a very big topic in Western Pennsylvania. The collapse of the Fern Hollow Bridge in Pittsburgh this year in January brought attention to the role federal funding plays in maintaining safe roads and bridges in our community. How would you ensure Southwestern Pennsylvania bridges stay safe, and what other infrastructure would you prioritize? I think about infrastructure as a topic that never used to be sexy, but now everybody is talking about it. And I believe our first candidate to answer this question is Mr. Will Parker.
Yes, infrastructure is a big deal right now. As we know, Joe Biden, our president, has passed the infrastructure bill, and we need to make sure that this funding, again, comes into our community. I was the first, and to my knowledge, I'm the only candidate up here who reached out to Cheryl Mooney, who is the director at PennDOT, who's in control of this project. And I reached out to her because I wanted to make sure that this Fern Hollow Bridge was rebuilt by all of us. You know, there's a lot of equity in it, and we need to be a part of this project, and not just this bridge, but all of our bridges within the district. Now is the time. Now is the time to get more people involved, diversify these contracts, get people certified, and get them out there, especially, like I said, people of color on these construction sites working and operating heavy machinery. Like I said, and I want everybody to go out. Next time you approach a construction site, tell me if you see one black person in this district operating any heavy machinery. If you don't, vote for me, because I'm going to change that.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Woodard.
I believe right now, with Joe Biden just coming here on the date that the Fern Hollow Bridge came down, shows the importance of what we need from the White House. And we also need all the money continue to flow in from Congress to repair our bridges. I believe right now at the same time that the jobs will be coming based on the fact that we need also education. We have people going to college for their associate's degree, bachelor's degree, but we also forgetting about the people that we need to work on these bridges with a secondary education as far as a technical school. So therefore, I believe that money should be coming in from Washington, D.C. to help out the local communities and all the bridges.
Mr. Dickinson.
The Fern Hollow Bridge collapsing was a disaster, and my wife and two daughters and I, we walk across that bridge. I used to drive across it to go to work, and we walked underneath of it through Frick Park, and that could have been us. It could have been anyone that was injured by that disaster, and so we got a lot of work to do. Right now, we need Democrats in Congress who are going to support the infrastructure bill. Representative Lee, when she was asked on an interview a number of months ago whether she would support infrastructure bill, she said that she didn't answer it because she wasn't sure whether or not she could support an infrastructure package. But we need people in Congress who are going to fight for their constituents and not fight for special interests down in Washington, D.C. We need people who are going to say they're going to do the right thing for the American people and for the people of this region. And for me, we're going to have to fight for that infrastructure money. It's not going to come here automatically. And so we're going to have to work alongside Democrats and get along with them, not be polarizing and not be divisive. And I'm going to go down to the Washington, D.C. and be able to deliver to the American people and bring jobs and permanent jobs here in southwestern Pennsylvania.
Mr. Irwin, you're next.
Fern Hollow is a bridge that my bus that I took to work goes over every single day. It's one of 150 bridges like that in this region, and we have to get them fixed. I'm the person who knows how to get the money from that $1.7 trillion infrastructure bill. I worked in the U.S. Senate for 5 years, and I was responsible for infrastructure for our Pennsylvania senator. I was able to get $425 million to build the light rail transit system in the South Hills. I know that the system, 80% of that bridge funding comes from the federal government, but that program does not have something for what I would call orphan bridges and orphan roads, which many people go over, but the municipalities have to pay for. And PennDOT doesn't do it, the federal government doesn't do it. We need to have a special fund for those smaller projects which still are byways for so many people who are transporting themselves. So I support the president for what he's done on infrastructure, and we have to make sure it gets all the way down to our local roads and bridges.
And Representative Lee.
Thank you. It's unfortunate in politics the ways in which we will take a soundbite instead of taking a history and a record. The reality is that I have and said in that interview that I am a strong supporter of infrastructure, but not just the infrastructure bill that passed, but the full bill that President Biden suggested and put forth in the beginning. Right now in our country, we have such an infrastructure need that is almost scarcely met, through the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It was the floor, not the ceiling. It's important that we have people who understand the urgent need that we have. Not since the New Deal have we had an investment in our roads, our bridges, the infrastructure of this country that we need. Right now in Allegheny County, we have 1,100 bridges in poor condition out of 1,500. That means we will need so much money, and we can invest in it through a Green New Deal, which is an investment in our bridges and our roads and our climate crisis that would build new bridges when creating union jobs in this community. I have been a strong supporter, and as the only sitting representative, I've already brought back millions of dollars into our district for such projects.
Mr. Dickinson, I'll give you 30 seconds to rebut.
Yes, just to set the record straight with Representative Lee, politicians have a tendency to do this. She's an elected official, so she's quite good with her words. But when she was interviewed on this particular topic with regards to infrastructure, she specifically stated that she could not give an answer as to whether or not she would support the infrastructure package. Right now, we need Democrats in Congress who are going to work alongside the Biden administration and members of Congress to bring back resources to this district. We don't need more politicians playing games. We need people who are going to get to Congress and get things done. Let's
stay on this topic, but I think Representative Lee, you'd like to rebut?
Yes.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Actually, specifically, it was about a 3-minute answer to that question, in which case I mentioned how, as a legislator, I recognize that our goal is to co-govern with our communities, which means that sometimes we need to come with the full package. What is the entire information? I said that I was a strong supporter of the Biden administration's plan to keep Build Back Better and the infrastructure bill together, that we need fighters for both of those things because we cannot pit our infrastructure with our prescription drug costs and our child tax credit. We need folks who will fight for every dollar for our infrastructure, social and physical, which I will do.
That is time. And I think, Mr. Parker, you'd like to also say something too regarding infrastructure.
Absolutely. I want to tell the people to don't believe Steve when he sits up here and says that he's the only person who could get us this money. You have to do more than just say what you did in the past as far as bringing money back to this district. Did you make sure that this money was allocated equally? Did you make sure that people of color were included? Tell that end of the story too. Because if you can't, This is why we're faced with poverty. This is why we're faced with gun violence, because there's no value, because these people, they go to Washington, they go to the state level, they get this money, and they don't make sure that it's allocated equally.
Thank you very much. That'll do for now. And I do want to give Mr. Irwin a chance to react to that question directly. How do you respond to that about how do you follow the money?
Yeah, so it's suggested that that I would not fight to make sure that there was that minority and marginalized communities and small businesses would benefit from that kind of investment. And my entire life has been spent to make sure that these communities do benefit. As the chair of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission for Pennsylvania, their advisory committee, I've been working to make sure that minority in business and disadvantaged businesses get their fair share and find ways for them to participate in that kind of thing. In my law practice, I helped set up minority and women business-owned enterprises. That's how I've spent my entire career.
Give us the name of one minority-owned construction
We're going to move on to the next
company
question,
that you help fund.
Mr. Parker. It's not your turn to talk right now. We're going to stop right there. We're going to have actually some more chances to talk about infrastructure because it's part of everything that we talk about topics-wise in this discussion as we look towards Congress. And it really does play into our next question. And that is about the power grid, and it's about the environment. The power grid in Western Pennsylvania has really reduced the amount of coal it uses to generate electricity. Given the climate crisis and given the reality of the American and the global economies right now, will fossil fuels always be part of the energy equation? So this question first goes to, I think, Mr. Woodard. You're the first to answer the question.
That is a very tough question right there, but I believe it is. And in addition to that, I believe that Pennsylvania, we have a lot of fossil fuel right underneath our feet here. And if it's going to cause people to have jobs and to continue to have income, I believe that we should go ahead and continue to use the fossil fuel that we have right here in Pennsylvania because of the jobs. Sometimes people indicated that there will be a problem with it because it might contaminate our water system. So therefore, again, I believe that we have scientists and we should figure out what the issues are and what the problems, and if there's a way that we can divert any chemicals or any problems towards our farmers and our land and our properties.
Mr. Dickinson.
Climate change in the environment is very important. My wife and two daughters and I, we take a walk through Frick Park every week. And when my wife goes out and she checks her phone, she checks the air quality. And we have some of the worst air quality in all the United States right here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and that is due to fossil fuels. That's due to the industries that are polluting our air. And it causes asthma, it causes respiratory diseases. This is something that's affecting our children and our families here in Pittsburgh. And so for me, we need to move away from fossil fuels as soon as possible. Move to a green new manufacturing industry, to wind and solar and electricity. That's very important, but also have a federal jobs guarantee for families who are in the fossil fuel industry to transition into solar and wind. And they have the skill sets to already do that. And so for me, it's very important that we focus on the environment, but then we also focus on jobs as well and ensure that families retain permanent jobs and they are also able to shift away and make sure that this is a healthy environment for our families and for the residents of southwestern Pennsylvania.
Thank you. Mr. Irwin, you're up.
Yeah, I've been the chair of, in the past, of Sustainable Pittsburgh, which says that we can have both. We can have jobs and we can have a clean environment. We definitely have to move away from fossil fuels. And I support the president's plan to electrify our grid and have half of our vehicles be electrified by 2030 and by reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. We definitely have to move toward wind power and solar power, and we're doing that, and that's absolutely very important. But the wind doesn't blow all the time, and you've got to have other clean energy, relatively clean energy like natural gas in those intermittent times. We can have both.
Okay. Summerlee.
Thank you. As I mentioned, or as has been mentioned, climate crisis is one of the most pressing issues we have right now facing not just our region, not just our country, but our world. We need Democrats, elected Democrats who are going to be courageous leaders, not just saying that we believe the science, but moving as if we know that the science is real. We need folks who are going to not just say it out loud, but vote that way, but direct investments that way. We must implement a Green New Deal. Our community is the poster child for the need for a Green New Deal. When we can invest and create millions of sustainable jobs by through a just transition that demonstrates that we will have clean jobs, union jobs, and a move to renewable energy. We can invest millions of dollars into our roads and our bridges, local jobs that will rebuild our communities. Right now, Our climate crisis is one of the most important issues. We have to have leadership that understands that we cannot pit jobs versus our climate. That's what I have been doing as a legislator my entire time.
Yes. Will Parker.
Here in Pittsburgh, our weather is reflective of what's going on with climate change. But the key is, what can we do from a strategic standpoint? And this is where I like to offer ideas. This is where I like to make sure that we get some of this federal funding and invest in someone who has an idea for electric car, preferably someone of color. We can do that right here. We can have electric car manufactured right here in this region. You see, I'm not sure what we can do and how much time it's going to take us to pass these Green New Deal laws, but what we can do is be proactive and take this funding and get it out to these entrepreneurs who want to start their own businesses to try to tackle climate change. And this is what I'm sincere about.
Mr. Woodard.
Again, with this on climate change and everything, I believe I would ask that question and everything, but I continue to, again, state that we want to support the jobs that are here and keep it on going.
All right. Thank you. We have about 6 minutes left to go. We're going to get to a question from a viewer right now. So if you can see this question on the screen, we are so glad to get some of these questions from viewers who got in contact with me this week. So the next question was submitted by Valerie, and Valerie asks, with the lack of employees in the education and health fields, what would you do to help influence and entice people to want to work in those fields? Again, that question is, with the lack of employees in the education and health fields, what would you do to help influence and entice people to want to work in those fields? And we're going to start with Jerry Dickinson.
Education is incredibly important. My wife is a teacher for the deaf, and I am a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and we have 2 daughters, and we're very excited about teaching them about the importance of education. Congress can do a lot to improve the lives of folks with regards to education. One is to expand access to Title I funding. Right now, there's a major disparity in federal dollars that are going to the state and local levels as a result of Title I, and we need to make sure that those dollars are distributed equitably across the state of Pennsylvania so that everyone has access to it. The other thing that Congress can do is to have aid programs and projects that actually bring funding for educational training programs to the local level for young children and for our public schools as well. This is very important. Public school education is incredibly important. We can incentivize teachers to come back to schools after the pandemic as a result of what we saw with the pandemic and employ them and ensure that we bring jobs to Western Pennsylvania.
Mr. Irwin.
So we have in the Mon Valley, we have a history of workers who have great work ethic, who have produced incredible things. And we have to send a message and be leaders to having companies reinvest in the Mon Valley. It's now time to do that. And our workforce development is the most important thing we can do to have companies want to invest here, through education, through taking the money that President Biden has set aside, $1.7 trillion for infrastructure, and using it to build vocational programs in our high schools, and to support our unions so they have strong programs to train and to really get really highly competent workers to enter our workforce. That's what's going to get manufacturers to want to put their businesses here and stay here.
Representative Lee.
Education and our healthcare fields, whether it be nurses or home healthcare workers, those are some of our most important industries, our frontline workers. But you wouldn't know how important they are if you looked at their pay, if you looked at the priorities that we have on those fields in our society. I think right now what we need to do is, and really what we should focus on is how in the past our state education system, PASHE system, was rooted in education and creating world-class educators. But the cost of college is so out of reach for so many, for millions of Americans, that so few want to enter that field. It's a thankless job where they have to go through tons of bureaucracy and yet get such low pay. We can't attract particularly educators of colors because they're going to schools that are chronically underfunded. And with our nurses, we know that a survey said that 93% of nurses want to leave the field. And we know that UPMC is the largest employer, state and private employer in our state, yet we have been fighting for decades for unions, jobs, and for a living wage.
Thank you. Mr. Parker.
manufacturing and technology go hand in hand. I think you encourage people and workers by encouraging entrepreneurs and business owners. I believe that workers it's time that they work for good bosses. I think we need to make sure that there are good bosses out there who make the job seem more interesting, something that somebody wants to work for. We need to encourage that, and that's why my focus is on business. My focus is on entrepreneurship. I'm the only candidate up here who even has the word business listed on my website. We have to start there. We have to start from the entrepreneur, and then that encourages the workers to come in and get involved and participate and be productive as well.
And Mr. Woodard, you'll have the final say on this workforce question.
I believe right now, first of all, this is my background, is in education. For the past 22 years, I've been running the organization called Pennsylvania College Access Program, which encourages people to get into college, get their associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's, and so on. I particularly feel education is number one. And I believe that we should bring money from the federal government to help people to go off to college. We also should eliminate the student loans once the people go into these fields in the healthcare education, go into the teaching field. Those will attract more people to those areas by eliminating their debt at the very end.
I think we talked about a lot of really important topics. I think we got into the meat of a lot of really important things that voters in the new Congressional 12th are thinking about right now. And now it is time for our closing statements, and we will begin in reverse order that we began in, and that means we start with Representative Summerlee.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. In 7 days, we can make history. We can elect the first Black woman to ever serve Pennsylvania in Congress. A proven and the only experienced legislator here, and a proven champion for working families. But first, to address the elephant in the room, we will have to navigate multi-million-dollar smear campaign that has called me everything but what I am, a Republican, someone who is not a good enough Democrat, someone who has not worked for us. But the reality is that I have spent my life dedicated to expanding the electorate, to reaching out to voters of color, of Democrats who are young and progressive, of multiracial, multi-generational. And we have been able to do that by fighting for the basic rights of folks. This is about people who will fight for working interests, not corporate, for a living wage, for equitable education and housing, for transportation and infrastructure, for health care for every single person, for relief for our working families. That's what we have an opportunity to do here. And we have an opportunity to do that by investing in people who invest in people. That we can elevate and fight for poor and working class people, and we can have a diversity of perspective and someone who has lived experience fighting for the people who are most impacted by these issues.
On to closing statements from Steve Irwin now.
So, as evidence in tonight's debate, this primary election has been really hard fought. And during this campaign, I've listened to so many of you, from the communities in the Mon Valley to Westmoreland County to the neighborhoods in South Park to the city of Pittsburgh. And we've discussed the great challenges ahead that we have in our neighborhoods, to our democracy, to our planet. I believe in our president. I believe in our party. I believe in the institutions that we have of government, and I believe in you. We know that this election really is about one thing: who can deliver to help President Biden bring real tangible results for the people of Western Pennsylvania, to all the people of Western Pennsylvania. Based on my experience over the last 3 decades, at every level of government, in every branch of government, and my record of being a doer who gets things done, I'm that candidate. Don't ask me, ask your neighbor, ask your congressman for the last 28 years, ask labor unions who've all endorsed me. I'm humbled to have their support.
Mr.
I'd be honored
Irwin,
to have your vote on May 17th.
That's your time. Thank you, Mr. Dickinson. You're next.
Statistically speaking, I probably shouldn't be here today. I came up out of the Allegheny County foster care system, grew up in a multiracial foster home of 11 children, and then made my way up to becoming a tenured constitutional law professor at just the age of 32. And now I'm ready to go down to Washington, D.C. and make a difference for this region. I've worked hard my entire life. I work hard for my 2 daughters and my wife, and I'm going to go down to Washington, D.C. to work hard on behalf of the people of this region. We certainly don't need to send an ineffective state legislature like Summerlee down to Washington, D.C., and we certainly don't need need to send a millionaire and someone who owns a golf course like Steve Irwin down to Washington, D.C. There's enough rich men down there in Washington, D.C. We need to send people with experience. We need to send people with generational change and the leadership style that will get things done in Congress and work alongside the Biden administration to bring resources to this region and make this place a better place for not only my two daughters, but millions of other people across the United States. Thank you.
Jeffrey Woodard, your closing statement.
Yes, I want to thank you, everyone, for tonight. I basically want to say to you, who do you want to go to Washington and fight for you? Who do you want for someone down there who is not going to sell out? Who do you want that's someone that's going to go there and stand up for you? I don't have all the endorsements from the Democratic Committee, the Democratic Party. I don't have the endorsements from all the unions. I didn't go out and present a smear campaign against my opponents or anything. But at the same time, I went out there and I stood before you, the voters, and say, I'm here to fight for you. I'm here because you want a person that's going to go down to Washington, D.C., stand up for you, and I hear you, the parents who are single out there. I hear you, the students who are out there and who want to make sure that your student loans are taken care of. I hear you, the policemen who are out on the streets, who are standing there and going through all those bashings of defund me. I hear you, the gun right owners who are out there who state that you don't want someone saying, I want to take away your guns. I hear you, the mothers who are out there who state that you want someone who will go out there and be able to get your abortion if you want to. I hear you, and I'm here for you. My name is Jeff Woodard, and please vote for me on May 17th.
Mr. Parker.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for your time. I'm going to keep it real. I ain't come here with any notes. I ain't come down with any rehearsals. I was born and raised right here in Pittsburgh. I'm Pittsburgh's son, nephew of Willie Stargell. Steve Irwin's not from here. I don't even know where he's from exactly. I think, New York, Florida? X him out. Don't even go with him. Summer Lee, let's address her. You know, I stand up for black women. Black women put me on the ballot, but she's not coming at this from a business standpoint. She has let the unions suffocate our black businesses. She doesn't advocate for them, and she doesn't deserve to be the next congressman. I am here for the people. I am sincere. We need to make sure we are included in this technology. That hasn't been brought up today. A lot of things haven't been brought up today. But follow me, check out my website. Go over to Innovation Works on the north side, apply for investment. You know, there's a lot of money out here, and I'm the money guy. I want to make sure we get the money so we can increase our value and quality of life. Vote for Will Parker.
Thank you to all of the candidates today. I truly appreciate you coming here to WTAE and sharing your thoughts with us. It really means a lot that we can get together again and talk about the issues. Thank you. I also want to remind our viewers that this is a new congressional district. If you're a registered voter, you can go to WTAE.com. We have a link to the State Department of Pennsylvania so you can check and see what congressional district you live in. And that's really important right now with these newly drawn districts. If you look around the world, you will find many countries where residents really just do not have access to a free and fair access to the ballot box right now. So in this midterm election, this primary race for Congress, with many issues that divide Americans, many issues that divide Pittsburghers, the value and the impact of casting your ballot has never been more clear. WTAE and the League of Women Voters are committed to helping you make the most informed choice when you do vote. That's our job. It's up to you to cast your ballot. Now, you can find continuing coverage leading up to next week's primary election in the WTAE mobile app and on WTAE.com. And also tune in to Pittsburgh's Action News 4 next Tuesday night beginning at 10 p.m. as we bring you the latest results in all the races in this primary. For all of us, I'm Shannon Perrine. Thank you for watching and have a good night.